Welcome back to Nightly Nonsense, where we attempt to make some sense out of the nonsense all around us. That's a lot of nonsense that is all around us. Listen, I want to go back and talk about one of my favorite stories in the New Testament. I want to talk about it from an aspect of what's going on all around us today and how it could actually change life. Most people have heard me talk about this a ton. I want to remind you of something, right? I want you to remember the basics of Christianity. So I want to go back to John chapter 8. I want to talk about the woman caught in adultery. You know, many years ago, probably 15 years ago, when this story first fell upon me in a real way, right, in a meaningful way, had read it before, it had meaning, but when it really hit home and I started having understanding of it, and God actually used it to move some mountains, to do some incredible things, I really had no idea that it was preparatory in nature for things that I was going to go through, that I would need this more than anybody that I was talking to it about. And the importance of being able to live through it, right, and experience this whole thing. But in John chapter 8, we get this woman caught in adultery. And here on Nightly Nonsense, I'm not trying to read through the scripture and do a Bible study out of it, trying to take some broader looks at things, right? But this is a story that has some incredible details, and I want to take the next few nights and just remind you of what it really means to be different in our culture today, right? This story starts off with Jesus teaching some people. He's in the middle of teaching. He's in the middle of, right, directing people in righteousness and what the kingdom of heaven looks like and how his way is different than what these people had been living by, right, for hundreds and hundreds of years. You see, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the teachers of the law, the scribes, the religious people, all of these people had taken the principle, the concepts of God, right? The 613 laws, and they had developed a way of life around these. The oral traditions, right? The written tradition. This is how we, right, determine this. This is how we look at this, and we, right, reflect on what God had said, and we're going to follow it this way. Now, every single religious leader, all the rabbis, all the people, they all had different interpretations, right? They would look at it and say, this is what I teach that this means. This is what I teach that this means, right? And then they come to some kind of a consensus, and you have this Sanhedrin, this grouping, right, of religious leaders that oversaw all of this and developed rules and regulations based on their interpretations of what God was saying. Now again, you got in the book of Judges the fact that every man did what was right in his own eyes, his own way. They'd have the law read to them, they'd try to remember parts of it, they'd conveniently forget parts of it, and they'd interpret it the way that they thought it was. So much so that some of the things like the year of Jubilee, the every 7 years, letting the land lay fallow for a year, all those things just went by the wayside. And it's funny that the interpretation of the really smart religious people, they didn't include some of those things, right? They kept the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law, really. And so when Jesus came down, he came down to infuse the spirit of the law. This is what God means. God's not up in heaven going, you break this little tiny bit of it, right, and I'm going to strike you down. No, he is up there saying every bit of it is super important, and you need to be perfect. You need to hold it all. And if you let any of it fall, then you're guilty, right, that you've sinned. This is why when the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and says, hey, I've kept all the law. Well, that's crazy. Moses and Joshua both looked at the people and said, you can't do this. It's impossible for you to do this whole thing without God, without God's help. Right? So you have Jesus trying to impart upon people how life is different through his eyes. Right? That God understands we're human. God understands we're going to make mistakes. God understands that we're going to fall. God understands that we live in a sinful world. God understands that we have an enemy who prowls around looking for whom he can destroy and devour. God understands all of that, and he's making a way. Right? These people are actually listening to the way. Right? They're actually listening and get the opportunity to be taught by the way, the answer, right? The promise by Jesus. And so they're sitting around and they're learning about the kingdom. And all of a sudden, right, some of the religious leaders drag a woman. Now, understand that the concept here is when you're dragging a woman, right, to Jesus, you got her probably by the hair. And this is a woman that we're going to find out is caught in adultery. So this is probably not a woman that they said, okay, yeah, get dressed, get ready to go, like, you're coming with us type of a thing. Now, they may have. They may have treated her respectfully and let her get all dressed up and let her come to Jesus and walk in front of him. But the whole context here is these men are about ready to stone this woman for being caught in adultery. I don't think they really care what she looks like. I don't think they really care that she was put together. And they drag her to the feet of Jesus. They drag her to Jesus. Now, I want you to understand, these men don't care two diddly squats about this woman. They're only using her to get what they want, right? They want an opportunity to trap Jesus. They want an opportunity to get Jesus to do something wrong according to their traditions, not according to the law. Right now, they think that their traditions and the law are one and the same, but they're not. Right? Jesus points that out over and over, that they're not one and the same. Just like with you, your traditions are not one in the same. They're not the same thing as God's, who God is. Hopefully they're close. Hopefully they're somewhere in the neighborhood, in the ballpark. But they're not the same. The way that you look at things isn't necessarily the way that God looks at things. We need to understand that, right? We need to understand that, and we need to be looking for understanding. Not our understanding of it, but what is God's understanding? What does God mean about these things? So I want to leave it right there. We're going to pick it up tomorrow night. But I want you to start looking at the story, John chapter 8, right? The story of the woman caught in adultery. Read through that. Start pulling out some stuff because there's a lot of nonsense, right, that's going on with this whole thing. And we want to look at it and see how can we apply it to what's going on all around us. The thing I want you to think about, right, with this whole thing is, man, there's a lot of people dragging other people all around and putting them at the feet of people. We do that. We drag people to Jesus and expect that Jesus is going to beat up these people. Jesus is going to set them straight. Jesus is going to take care of this. Jesus is going to make this right according to our interpretations and according to what we think is right. So who are you dragging to Jesus? What's your purpose for dragging them to Jesus? Are you even dragging them to Jesus? Or are you just skipping the whole Jesus part and you're just taking out to stone them? I'm guessing you probably today have somebody by the hair that you've caught doing something that isn't right according to you. The question is, what's your purpose? What's your motives? What's your intentions? Where are you dragging them to? So you chew on that. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Nightly Nonsense.